other interesting political news, you have the House of Representatives passing a bill to stop states from the ban of new gasoline vehicle sales. Looking at you, California. Now, this is a very important piece of legislation, which I don't say that too often since mainly legislation is usually just fluff that doesn't affect your life. But in this case, California, in their infinite, what's the opposite of wisdom, moronic decision making, they wanted to ban the sale of gas cars. And it is by 2030 or 2035. They're already going to ban gas generators, so you will freeze to death or sweat to death in the summers. And they also passed a law to ban gas lawnmowers, gas leaf blowers. Pretty much they want to ban convenience in many ways, I would argue. Now it's even more hilarious that California with the current electric grid, because again, they're not smart enough to do something like nuclear energy, which is one of the best forms of energy that we currently have in terms of the current technologies to choose from. But California, they'll have rolling brownouts and blackouts where they'll tell you you're not allowed to charge your electric car today because we're struggling with our electric grid because it sucks, simply put. So they can't meet the current demands of the energy grid, but California thinks they're going to somehow be able to handle a whole fleet of EVs. This is coming from a state so mentally vacuous. They spent $400 million building a net under the Golden Gate Bridge. $400 million for a net. That's how utterly inept the state is in terms of their practices. That's ridiculous. And of course, the project took years. And apparently they did it because they wanted to save some lives because people were jumping off. $400 million. And it seems realistically it's catching a lot of smartphones, perhaps. That's how they spend money there, which is no surprise. They're so utterly in debt most of the time, which is why they have to tax their people, the people who still remain there, more and more and more. Now, in terms of the significance of them banning gas cars, people ask, well, why should people in the rest of the country care? It's because so many people still live in California despite being taxed to death and having every part of their life controlled by the government, it seems. And that becomes more true as each law passes and each day passes. People still live there. It is right now, the 10th largest car market on the planet is California. That's huge. Now, they're the 10th largest. In terms of the other places, they're literally a larger market than some countries. Now, so they're the 10th largest of the planet. Now, slightly larger than them in the order here, you got Italy, France, UK, Brazil, India, Germany, Japan, US, then China. So China's the biggest, the US collectively, it's the second biggest, what have you. So a lot of the policies there affect businesses who develop vehicles. Now, in terms of the exact policy, interestingly enough, they never specifically named California. Now, I think this is good because it gives consumers, I know Californians hate this, but it's giving consumers something called freedom. So they can choose what type of vehicle they want to buy and not have the government decide for them. Because some of us like to do what's actually green fiscally and better for the environment. What's best for the environment is buy a Toyota Camry with an internal combustion engine. It lasts 1 million miles about and a quarter of a century. That's much better than buying a disposable EV. And again, technology moves very quick. There very well may be a new battery and a new recyclable technology that makes them green for the environment. Right now, with the current technology we have, best thing you can do is buy an internal combustion engine, run it into the ground. But I moderately digress. In terms of the specific legislation, it looks like legislation was passed by the House. The vote breakdown 222 to 190. So that 190 morally vacuous politicians don't want you to have that freedom. Now it looks like specifically it would bar states from limiting the sales of gas-powered cars and rescind any federal approvals for states to do so that were issued since the start of 2022. While the vote, and according to the Hill, quote, while the vote was largely along party lines, 8 Democrats voted with Republicans in favor of the bill. The other reps, Yorinda Cardivano from New Mexico, Jim Costley from California, Henry Cooler from Texas, Donald Davis from North Carolina, Jared Golden from Maine, Brian Higgins from New York, Mary Glenstedt Perez from Washington, and Gabe Velasquez from New Mexico. Now, interestingly enough, this is very unusual in politics because usually, especially Democrats, they're much more, what's nicer, not a gang. The group is very tight. They very rarely break ranks in terms of voting with Republicans. Republicans, they do it every single day. They are pejoratively known as rhinos, or Republican in name only. And it's one of those things where I wish there was more crossover in the votes, because it would show perhaps more people are reading legislation, and it's not just our gang is cooler than you are, one side is better than the other. It's more of a intellectual conversation. Although, let's be honest, intellectual conversation in Washington is perhaps as rare as finding a winning lottery ticket in where you never find one. As rare as finding a winning lottery ticket in a library. Partially because people don't go to libraries anymore, but people who buy lottery tickets, I would venture to say they probably don't go to libraries either, since they probably don't read math books, because statistically you would know the odds are basically about 1 in 300 million or worse to win the lottery. It's a ridiculous thing, but all too reminiscent of 1984, when they have people playing the lottery and worshiping sports balls. Again, do not make that a drinking game. I mention that book far too often, unfortunately, because the cultural decay is so rampant in the United States, as well as political. Now, going back to the bill, it looks like, interestingly enough, they do not specifically name California. As far as I know, with the data we have right now, that is one of the few states that has explicitly passed a law to ban consumers in California from having the freedom to choose an internal combustion engine vehicle. Which again, EVs, what's a battery cost for an EV? About $23,000. They're a lot like smartphones, but again, scientific breakthroughs, technology breakthroughs, we might have better technology tomorrow. We shall see. Now, it looks like they say, however, under the Clean Air Act, the state can pursue clean car rules that are stricter than those of the federal government if they get permission from the EPA. It looks like last year, the EPA reinstated a waiver allowing California a rule aimed at limiting vehicle pollution to take effect. Since then, the state has also eyed a complete phase-out of new sales of gas-powered cars to increase EV usage. Other states often adopt California-given rules, and again, it's one of those things like dominoes. Traditionally, they start more often than not in Canada, then they go to California, and then the whole United States adopts it. In most of the time, that is unfortunate. So it'll be interesting to see. Of course, when it comes to the government, it looks like, of course, the White House doesn't like this. It says, this is from the White House. They say, quote, the administration strongly opposes passage of H.R. 1435, unquote. Again, marketing and politics. What an inspiring bill name, 1435. But I partially digress. And they claim that the bill would restrict. Oh wow! Of course, the White House says, "quote This bill would quote restrict the ability of California and its citizens to address its severe air pollution challenges." Unquote. So it'll be interesting to see. Of course, they don't teach basic how the government works in terms of public schools, perhaps because they don't want you to actually participate in politics. That's my sneaking suspicion. But will it pass the Senate? How far will this really get? That's where I'm a little pessimistic, although it does give you a good sign of where your representatives are voting on this topic. Depending on how you feel with this topic, you may or may not want to reach out to those representatives and say, hey, you voted for this once, you're getting my re-election vote, or you voted for this, you voted nay, I want to have my nice V8 or V10, ideally, with a stick shift. You're taking that ability away from me, we're going to primary you. I'm going to vote for your competition. We're going to get someone else to be the nominee, and we're going to vote for them in office. But it'll be interesting to see. And of course, as I always say, time shall tell. Thank you, everyone, so much for taking the time to tune in today. Also, I know we're trying to get to 4,000 subscribers by the end of September, so if you could click that button, I would greatly appreciate it. Also, don't forget to take the time to like and comment the video. I really appreciate your feedback, whether you're on the front line of UAW or in the corporate office at Ford. Your feedback makes the show much more interesting and is able to make me update the videos with even more data, and it really helps it, I think, make a better experience. And also, the feedback improves the show because, thanks to the comments, I realize I need to actually work on my enunciation as well as my articulation and slowing down a little bit when I'm speaking. So, together, we're going to make the show together that much better, and I greatly appreciate your participants. Also, don't forget to take the time to tell your family, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, heck, tell your enemies, tell anyone and everyone. Just stay safe and fight the good fight.